Well, hello and welcome to today's presentation, which is entitled Position and Prepare Your Chiropractic Practice for Maximum Sale Value. This is Dr. Tom Necela with a Strategic Chiropractor. I want to be very thankful to ChiroHealthUSA for inviting me on board. And I'm sorry also for those of you who are part of the live presentation, which due to technical trouble went awry. And so we're recording this for you so that you can still get this information. And again, my name is Dr. Tom Necela from Strategic Chiropractor. And in today's presentation, we're going to be talking about how to prepare and position your practice for its maximum sale value. And one of the things you need to ask yourself is, when are you now? I mean, a lot of times we hear, where are you now? But really, when are you looking to transition or sell your practice? And that is a very key question that we need to ask ourselves as we get into what I call the home stretch, really the last 5 or so years until we decide, hey, this is probably time when I want to retire. This is probably time when I want to sell or transition or slow down or something. It's really important for us to target a date so that we can begin honing in on things that we can do to better position and better prepare our practice for success. In that, you're probably asking, well, what do I need to know? Yes, what do you need to know in order to plan those steps successfully and to time it well for best results? That's what we're going to be talking about in today's webinar. And this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart, because my reality check was I was thrust into these questions. I had a strong practice, but I suddenly found myself in a very weak position when my great practice found itself with an owner who was both deteriorating physically. I was very ill, and for about 3 years, I went kind of progressively down in flames. And when I found out my practice was also very dependent on me. And that is not atypical for many chiropractors. Our practices really require us there to run them. And what I found further was that I was pitched an unexpected curveball. I thought I would be able to sell my practice, and that income, because I had a great practice, would then sustain me. But that would not sustain me for the rest of my life. And in many cases, it won't sustain many of you, depending on where you are in your practice, in your retirement savings, or anything. Well, my bigger problem was attempting to hit a curveball like that when I don't know what my options are or what my choices are, made me look a little bit like this guy. So when I went around from broker to broker and said, hey, I think I need to sell my practice, and they told me this is it, then I kind of swung and missed because none of those solutions were really going to get me to what became my second act. And what I discovered was there was a gap where I was and where I needed to be. Now, I was younger, in my 30s at the time, but some of you may find yourself discovering similar gaps, that if you need X amount of dollars to retirement, your practice sale may or may not get you there. In which case, you might want to say, well, okay, there's the curveball. What's plan B? How do I hit this thing? And when I asked the same question of myself, that led me to a few really critical discoveries. And my first discovery was that most medical doctors, dentists, attorneys don't transition or sell their practice as we chiropractors do. In other words, the typical chiropractic sale is this. You wait to sell and to plan your transition until the end. When you're tired, when you're slowed down a ton, when your volume, your visits, your collections, and everything about your business has declined, and now you wait to sell it all, and you're hoping to get maximum value. Well, I hate to tell you, that's not the way it works. And that's what also the medical doctors figured out. The dentists figured out. The attorneys, they all figured these things out. And they say, no, Tom, that's not how we transition. There's no way we would be able to get what we need to get into retirement or to get to that second act or next stage by just doing that. That's horrible. And I thought, yeah, and that's the solution that is presented to most chiropractors. And what I discovered were there were more options for your sale than that typical transition or typical sale when waiting till the very end. And by seeing that there were some other options, some other doors to go through, then I was able to love life after practice. That literally, I love what I'm doing right now, which is helping you now transition your practice, helping you sell your practice, helping you structure something that will actually get you to that second act or your next goals. And that's what we're going to be talking about on our webinar. And that's what we've been doing here for over 10 years at Strategic Chiropractor, where we started literally helping chiropractors in business side, talking about billing, coding, documentation. That's how we got hooked up with ChiroHealthUSA. And what happened over time is our clients started saying, Tom, how do we get out? I've got this associate. How do I get them in? How do I slow down? How do I maximize the value? And what we realized was there was no one that was really helping chiropractors do this in a new way, in a modern way. Sure, the old school brokers are out there. The old ways are still out there, but there are so many more opportunities these days to transition or to sell your practice smarter. That's what we're helping people with. So I say, why not you? I mean, I sort of stumbled through this on my own, but I would absolutely believe you can do better than me if you're aware of the very same dangers, obstacles, mistakes, or errors that are in your way. In fact, there are 8 what I call positioning errors that will literally prevent you from selling your practice for maximum value. And remember, the title of this presentation was preparing and positioning your practice for maximum value. So let's talk about some of those positioning errors, because if you make these, you'll either be like the guy on the left who kind of does a face palm, oh, why did I do that? A little bit disappointed, or the guy on the right who's pretty angry and frustrated at himself. Neither are what you're going for. So if you turn this around, then these same positioning errors can be then keys so that you can hit your target, so that you can sell your practice for maximum value, or so that you can transition towards your goals in the way that you want it. So let's dive in and let's look at error number 1, which is literally that you can transition anytime. So yes, I want you to be in control, but I also want you to know that you must be very aware that there is a lot out of your control. So it's a big myth to think that you can just guide this process in every aspect at any time that you want. The reality is simply this: 50% of transitions are involuntary due to one of the 5 big D's, I call them. Well, you can see the screen. It's either death, disability, divorce, disagreement, or decline. You know, literally, if you're dead, obviously you can't practice. If you're disabled, you may be unable to practice. If you suddenly find yourself amidst a divorce, you may have to sell your practice or share your practice with your spouse that you're now divorcing or is divorced you. If you have a disagreement with the person that you thought would buy your practice, that's not going to help. And they may tell you to get out, or they may say, I want out and buy out, or they don't want in, whatever it might be. And if you let your practice decline to the point that it's not sellable, all of those are obviously bad outcomes. So the key to turning this around, to positioning practice right, is what I call the sell curve. You have to recognize and realize that every chiropractic practice goes through the same basic stages. We start down here in struggle. As we start in practice, we have a little bit of income, and usually this is the beginning of our practice. Then we go through the phase called stability, where, you know, we're not worried that the doors are going to close, the income's increasing a little bit, but we haven't quite hit that peak of success, is where we're enjoying the best income that our practice will give us. Now, everyone's peak of success may differ in terms of how high it goes in the income. It may differ in terms of how long it took you to get there. It may differ in terms of how long you can ride on this peak. But what eventually happens to most practices is the slack phase. And here's what it is. The same things you did on the left side of the graph during the struggle and the stability phase to grow your practice that led it to its peak of success, you start slacking off on. Be honest. You don't want to do those things anymore. You're tired. You feel like you have enough momentum, whatever it is. But then what you also notice is that the income begins to still slack a little bit too. The patient visits slack, and you begin a slight decline. Now, this is not as bad as when this decline picks up negative momentum and you enter the slip phase, and where things are really going downward fast. Now, if I were to ask you, hey, what's the best place to sell your practice? Of course, you would say, well, the success phase. And then I said, okay, well, the reality is you probably will miss that. We said, well, then I'd probably want to sell in the slack phase. Well, here's the really interesting and not so good news is that 60% of practice sales occur here in the slip phase, 20% occur in the slack phase, and only 10% occur in the success phase. In fact, all of small business sales follow this pattern. If you're really particular on the math, you go, where's that other 10%? It's sitting here in the stability phase. Now, if you really want to question this graph and you say, well, what happens at the ends? Well, down here in the struggle phase, these businesses don't sell because there's not enough income, track record, history, anything like that to make them sellable. And all the way at the end of the graph on the other side, there's a little gap where you can slip too far to where it's not sellable as well. So obviously, key number one to positioning is realizing, hey, you cannot sell anytime. There is this sell curve that's going on, and it's going on in your business right now. And it is your decision, and it is under your guidance to sell at the right time. Now, let's talk about error number two. Error number two is that my practice will sell quickly. And a lot of people say, yeah, I'm in a really great place. Houses around here are selling quickly, or this is a great practice with a great reputation in the community. And all of that may be true, except that selling your business is not exactly like real estate. There are some parallels, but it's actually much more difficult. And the primary reason is when people buy real estate, they buy a house, they've already decided they want to live in your town. They've already decided they want to be in that area, maybe at the best. But when they buy a practice, we routinely have buyers that might say, hey, I'm interested in practicing Colorado, Georgia, Florida, New York, Washington State, and Southern California. Well, that's all over the country, basically. See, it doesn't matter so much the local market. It can be helpful, but it's not going to make it sell quickly. In fact, one thing you need to realize from the start in terms of how long it takes is quickly really depends. And if you ask an owner, most owners will say, hey, my practice will probably sell in less than 5 months. But here's what happens when you ask a professional. In fact, you have professional business brokers, we have bankers, we have everybody that is involved in the transaction. Here's what they say. Less than 6 months is actually only about 28% of the practices. In 6 to 9 months, now we're at about 31%, 9 to 12 months, 21%. 12 to 18 months. Now we're over a year. That's 11%. And over a year and a half, maybe 9%. And look at that last statistic. 188 days is the median number of days on the market. So that's about 6 months. Now that includes the ones that sell very, very fast. And what I've found is these same statistics then can go against you if you, again, don't time things right. So key number 2 is understanding how quickly really happens. Now, error number 3 is thinking that your practice is a potential gold mine. And remember, again, the title of this presentation is to position and prepare your practice. So if you already think it's a gold mine, you already think it's positioned perfectly, and you probably don't need to do any preparation. And largely, that is not true. Now, your practice may be a potential gold mine in that has obvious potential that can be worked, and you might look at it and say, hey, I only work this many hours, or I don't do any marketing like I used to, and all that kind of stuff. But the key to understand is simply this: Potential is like the icing, but practice performance is the cake. And what sellers don't understand, don't often realize, is buyers are buying the cake, not just the icing. If you look at it and you say, hey, there's a lot of potential to grow this practice. Well, sure. But what are the current revenues? If they're pitiful, they don't even want the cake. They don't want the icing of the potential there's to grow because there's not much cake there. If you say, well, I don't do any marketing, well, do you have any patients? Do you have enough, to sustain this practice? Or has it been a steep decline? Again, sure, it's got potential that somebody could turn it around, but there's got to be enough solid cake there for them to want to look or even consider the icing. So that's a real big key, because I hate to say it, many sellers all say the same thing. This practice has great potential. Hey, we got a great reputation in the community, and an ambitious buyer could do so much more. Well, you know what? Most buyers want to do what you're doing. They actually want to get in. They want to assume your income. They want to assume your patience. They want to get in, and that's why they're buying. If they were really, really, really ambitious, they probably would just start from scratch. Okay, these people want a leg up. They want a solid piece of cake to start with. And sure, icing can help add some attractiveness to it. But I also like to tell people that, if it's potential, it doesn't add to the value. It only adds to the attractiveness of it. So you got to be very aware of that. Error number 4 is assuming that someone will buy your practice. And it's usually someone my associate, my daughter, my son, my friend across the street, my colleague who I've spoken about to this before. They are going to be my chosen successor. They are my little king, little queen. They are my appointed line. And the reality is that this is a huge mistake. In fact, one of the big mistakes and the most common owner mistakes is we'll get that associate, that appointed successor in, and we will say to them, hey, someday all this will be yours. And we say, oh, look at all this. And the young chiropractor says, oh, you know what? That's great. But when will this all be yours? How much am I going to have to pay for it? And how am I going to get it? Right? So we just say someday all this will be yours, but we don't define when that someday will come. We don't define how much we'll be asking for that piece of the pie or that lineage that we're going to sell. And we don't define how in the world they're ever going to get it. Now, we're not alone in this, because sometimes you as the owner can be flattered by a buyer who says, wow, someday I want to buy this. But guess what? The same 3 questions apply on the other side of the fence. In other words, well, when do you want to buy that? For how much are you willing to pay? And how do you plan to fund it? How do you plan to purchase this? Because in their mind, they might be thinking 10 years, you want to get out in 2. They might be thinking you're going to give it away. In fact, I had an email literally the other day from a guy that said, I want to take an associate job where I work for them about 5 days and they hand the practice over to me. Literally, like, hand it over to me, like, hey, you worked here 5 years, now this thing is yours. So how much does that guy want to pay? 0. Well, if that's the way you want to transition, that may work, but some of you may say, no, I actually want them to buy my practice. I don't want to give it away. And so then the third question becomes really important of, well, how are they going to buy it? And that is absolutely critical for them to know. And so if the error is that assuming that somebody will buy the practice, then we have to avoid these mistakes that go along with it. And the key to understanding and to successfully transitioning or successfully selling your practice to your successor is this. It takes a pair of aces to play this game. And here's what I mean. The pair is on both sides of this fence here. Buyers need to be attracted to your option. To your option, meaning I want to sell now within the next year, not in 10 years. Okay, I want you to work as an associate for 3 and then buy me out. I want you to buy a partnership, whatever your option is. C is that they need to be competent clinically, because if they don't have the confidence in their clinical competence, then they're not ready to buy, or they won't want to buy. They'll want to stay as an associate. And E is they need to be equipped financially. In other words, they have to have the money, the down payment, the credit score, or a family that are willing to back them, or something that was going to financially enable them to do this. If they don't have these three things, they're not your ace. They are not going to be your buyer. Now, on the other side of the fence, you need to be things as well. You need to be able to transition. You know, so many chiropractors have trouble letting go. And I can understand why, but you can't tell somebody, hey, I want to sell you this practice, and then simultaneously hold on to the practice and not let go, which is also why C is you have to be very clear about your timing. I've talked to so many buyers and sellers, unfortunately, who said, well, you know, the old guy told me he was going to be out in 3 years. It's 5 years now. I don't think he's ever going to let it go. See, the problem is, got a buyer who's attracted, who's competent and equipped, but you're not able to let go, or you're not clear about your timing. It's not going to happen. And finally, you have to be enticed with their offer. That's the E. I mean, sure, if they're ready, but they give you a lousy offer, then you're probably not going to accept it. And that is why I say it takes a pair of aces to play this game. Now, 2 quick and easy solutions to make sure of that. If you do have an associate that you would like to sell to down the line, first is you need to get this thing in writing. Okay? You need to literally put this in writing so you do not fall into the trap of being one of these someday all this will be yours. And then next is you need to sequence the steps of how it will happen, because if it is an associate buyout or some sort of time sale where it's not going to happen immediately, then they may not have the funds, and they may need to be able to plan for the funds, and you need to be able to plan and set milestones so that they make it, so that they have reasonable progress toward that goal, or so that you can see if they're not going to make it, and so that you don't have to have a failure at the end. Because we've helped so many chiropractors who said, well, you know, we were circling around this and we never could get it. And I said, well, do you have an agreement in writing? No. Okay. Well, that's a reason for failure. We've helped a lot of other chiropractors who said, you know, things seem to be going a little squirrely. I don't think this sale is going to work out. And I said, well, what are the milestones you put in place? What are the safeguards? What are the stop gaps kind of things? What are the metrics they need to meet to make this happen? They say, oh, we didn't do any of that. Well, no steps. That's why you didn't get there either. So those are some other keys if you're going to do an associate or buyout type of timed sale. And that's what we helped Dr. Mike do, who was wanting to slow down. A few years ago, he had his great associate, and neither one of them was ready to buy or sell immediately. Both wanted a commitment. And so they're just kind of like doing this dance, you know, and going around and around. They've got a good practice, they've got good finances. Hey, and the owner said, you know what, if I sell it to him and it doesn't work, I'm young enough, I can hatch plan B. I could try to sell it later again. I said, oh, you're the perfect candidate for this time sale, but he just didn't know how to do it. So we were able to help them do an associate buyout, and happily ever after, these two were able to do that very, very well with our guidance, our assistance. But not everybody does that. So again, let's keep going. The more errors we want to avoid, because some of you won't get things in writing, but some of you, that's not even your error. Some of you believe that the banks are just not lending. You believe you don't even want to go down this road because you don't want to finance it all. And I don't blame you. There's a lot of risk in owner financing. But there are a few keys that you need to understand, because if you've been listening to old school brokers who have been doing this forever and talk old methods, or you talk to your old buddies who got out 10 years ago, or you even consider how you got in 10, 20 years ago, it's different now. It's way different. And the good news is different is largely better. And here's what I mean. Now is actually the best time for lending ever in the history of our profession. And here's why. These buyers have more access to funds than ever before. The SBA now requires as little as 5% down. 5%. Now, they prefer 10%, but there are ways now that you can get a buyer in with 5% down. We've orchestrated many sales over the last couple of years since the SBA set in this rule in 2018, who now the buyers get in with 5%. That lowers the bar of entry for a lot of buyers. And by the way, that 5% can even be money that they get from their parents. It just can't come from you. It's got to come from them. Scratch and dent buyers can now even be approved. And what I mean by scratch and dent is people that have like less than perfect credit. And in the past, these people were all rejected. Now, banks will actually even consider them. New grad funding is even a possibility. The old adage was that you needed to be in practice for at least 2 years. Now, that is still the preferred mode for many banks. But there are now specialty banks that are accepting new grads for some transition option. To give you a perfect example, last year we did a sale with a doc who literally had never worked a day in her life. She went from high school to college to chiropractic school, and when she got out, she did her internship, found a practice in the area that she wanted to live, went over to Dad and said, "This is the practice I want to buy." Dad helped her buy that. Now, I'm kind of like pinching myself the whole time. I'm thinking, I can't believe this thing is even going to happen. I mean, this person has no experience. They have no money, but Dad has the money. Dad put it up, and she did have good credit. And the owner was willing to participate and help with the transition, and the bank lend. So these deals do happen. Here's the greatest thing, too, that is going on this day now. These rates obviously can fluctuate. Right now, we're in the 8% mark. And in fact, if I look at just the sales we've done in the last few months, that is even lower than that. Now, I don't want to promise that. And if you are listening to this webinar at some other period of time down the line, who knows? The interest rates could change, but right now they're excellent. So this is why we help Dr. Mario. And some of you may know this guy from presenting at ChiroHealthUSA. Well, you know him. He's a legend in our profession. He teaches all over the country. And he came to me with a really good problem. He said, "Hey, Tom, I've got a great practice, but I want to focus more on teaching. I want to focus more on giving seminars. I want to focus more on my speaking and my consulting business. That's going to require me to slow down because my practice is really good." Also, he had an associate, and he said, "I think he's not going to be my guy in terms of buyer. Love the guy, but I don't think financially he can swing it. I don't think that he's going to be our guy." And said, "Well, you know what? One thing is we always pursue the prospect at hand. I mean, if you have somebody interested in your practice, I suggest that you pursue them because that is a big, huge piece of the puzzle. And if you're able to go forward with that person, then you saved yourself a lot of time and trouble." And we walked forward with his associate, and it soon became clear that his hunch was right. This associate was not able to buy, but then he came with an even better one. He said, "Well, Tom, I got a plan B, but I don't think it's going to happen. It's a student." And then I let him know that, hey, you know what? Times have changed. Things have changed. Let's walk through with this guy. And he also had no clue how much his practice is worth. So he said, "You know what? I really don't know how to do any of this stuff." And we were able to say, "Hey, yes, we can help you with this." And he was kind of unsure that this could even be done. We said, "Absolutely, it can be done, and we can help you with this." And basically, he went from being in a position where he felt a little stalled and a little stuck in his practice to selling his practice. And yes, he sold it to, well, he was a student. We actually had everything lined up before the student even graduated, so that at the point that he was able to get his license, the closing coincided, and basically day one, this guy's got a license and he's the brand new owner of a practice. Now, of course, we also orchestrated a transition period with Dr. Mario so that he can teach this young person the wisdom and show them practice management. And who wouldn't want it from a guy like this? But this is all to tell you that these old myths that you hear, these kind of legends and rumors in our profession, you know what? They're dying out. And if you are able to orchestrate these deals, they can happen. And that's why I meant to tell you early on that, hey, there are more doors now in your transition than ever before. There are options available. So let's go on then to error number 6, which stops some people, and they just say, "Well, Tom, is anyone even buying practice? I mean, I heard no one's even buying practices." And the good news is practice market is not at all like this empty, vacant building where there's just all these practices sitting around. In fact, over the last few years, I had to change one of my older webinars because the deck was stacked a little differently where, there were a lot of docs looking to get out and maybe not so many looking to get in. And over the past several years, times change. And I'll tell you the number one reason, it may be a little bit of a surprising source to you. It's called the Millenials. A lot of people like to tease about the Millennials and say, oh my goodness, these people are, an entitled generation. They coming out in huge debts and all that. But guess what? The Millennials and others are buying. Our marketplace is booming. We have had set multiple records year after year after year over the last several years in number of practice sales that we've been doing. And here's why. Some of the things about millennials actually make them excellent buyers. So, for example, they've been accused of having this selfie syndrome. They love to take pictures of themselves. They love to be focused on how they look. Well, guess what? Looking like an associate versus looking as an owner. Owner looks better. It's it. It looks better to your buddies. It looks better to your friends. So, guess what that means? They want to buy your practice so they can look better. Millennials have been accused of having this bit of an entitlement syndrome. You know what? I deserve a six-figure income because I'm a doctor. Well, guess what? They're not going to get a six-figure income in most associateships, and they're not going to get it from starting from scratch, but they could get it if they bought your practice with your six-figure income in it. So this actually, again, makes them good buyers. Millennials have been accused of having this fear of missing out, or FOMO. It keeps them texting and on social media all the time. But this is, hey, it's all about the lifestyle. And they want, from the start, a doctor lifestyle because they said, hey, I am a doctor and I deserve this lifestyle. Well, again, not going to get it in the associateship, not going to get it in the startup, could get it if they bought your practice and assumed your lifestyle. Now, this sounds like a complete handicap in that they have a lot of high debt. And they said, man, I need some serious money to live and eat. I can't take this associateship that's paying me this low amount of money. And actually, they're correct. They wouldn't be able to pay their student loans. This also says, well, they probably can't do a startup because they won't have any money coming in at all. It makes them perfectly positioned to buy your practice. In fact, there are some student loan specialists that are basically advising healthcare professionals. The only way you're going to get out of this debt cycle is to buy a practice, to own a practice. So that high debt helps you. Then they also have associateship anxiety. You know what? I hate to say it. The history of our profession with associates is not very good. You know this. You've probably been there where you've had associates who have not worked out. And perhaps it's been their fault, and perhaps sometimes it's been our fault as the older docs in the profession. But needless to say, no matter whose fault it is, that rumor kind of spreads through the profession, and they say things like, well, I hear associateships never work out. I mean, I'll never get to buy this thing because these things don't ever work. And when they hear that thing, then they don't want to go as an associate. They want to go in as an owner. And so again, all of these things are keys to understanding why these people actually are buying practice, and it's not just the millennials. In fact, as I mentioned before, we were doing more sales. And if you just look at this map, this is just a few of our sales, but visually, we like to have fun at our team and track the sales, everything. But you could look at this and you say, wow, these are sales kind of like all over the map, literally geographically from each end of the country. We're selling practices nationwide, but they're also all over the map in terms of sale price. I mean, we have a practice that we sold, help a friend of a friend for as little as $40,000, and the lady was just going to shut it down, and yet you can go all the way up over $1 million, and they're selling. That's it. That's all I can say. So one of the things that you probably say is, okay, I understand. Yes, there's a lot of errors that I might have made, but in the beginning, you mentioned a gap. How do I get around the gap? Well, I can tell you this. The big error is staring at the gap and doing nothing. And the gap, for most chiropractors, takes one of two forms, sometimes both. The gap is a financial gap. In other words, I need this much money to be able to go to my retirement or my second act. Or the gap is an emotional gap. And the emotional gap might be, I'm not ready to leave. I don't know what I want to do after I retire. I kind of want to slow down, eliminate some of the management headaches, but I might not be ready to sell entirely. Well, there are people that can go around and around and around in that gap. Because if they look at their sale as final, as this is the last thing you're going to do for your life, and then you're going to sit on the couch and watch Andy Griffith reruns, yeah, that's a big gap. But what you don't realize is, again, there are more options than you might have thought about. It's kind of like going to the eyeglass store. You go, whoa, I just came in for a pair of glasses. I don't really need 280 choices, right? But the reality of the situation is there are more choices than just selling and walking away and being done with it for life. In fact, here are 12 common transition options that are available to many people. Now, they're not all good ones, as if you look at this list. So, for example, here circled in green, these are the ones that, are available to most people and are very positive. So we've got our traditional sale, you sell, and after a short transition period, you walk away into retirement. Then we have what we call the sell and switch, which is literally you sell, but then you stay on and switch roles with your buyer, and you stay on for an extended transition. So they might say, hey, I want you to stay on for 6 months or a year or whatever it might be. And guess what? They pay you for the practice on the front end, and they also pay you to stay on later. And that may be appealing to you because you say, I'm not quite ready to sell yet, or might be appealing to somebody who says, I want to slow down. And guess what? It's also appealing to the buyers because, it alleviates a lot of their fears of the patients going away when you leave, alleviates their fears of, I don't know how to run this business. And it's also good for one other party, and that's called the bank. Because now they know, hey, you know what? The former owner is going to be around for a little bit. This thing's going to go smooth because the bank does not like variables. It does not like rocky roads. Okay. Now, there are also what we call the associate buyouts. That's where somebody has a chunk of money and they give you a down payment or deposit now, and then the time of the sale hatches later. So again, if you're not interested in selling immediately, that could be an option. Then we have what we call the buy-in or earn-in. This is a person that maybe doesn't have any money or very little money, but they want to work for you and earn sweat equity toward an eventual purchase. We also have a traditional partnership where you say, hey, you know what? Let's share the overhead. Let's bring in a partner, maybe from across the street or down the road or something like that, and we can combine practices. And we even have what's called the hybrid partnership, where it's not necessarily a 50-50 split. And maybe you have a very large practice and you have a fleet of associates and you can sell a portion. I can sell off 25% or 20% or whatever it might be to this one. And then over time, I can sell off another piece, or I can sell another piece to another person. And you sell your practice in stages in that way. So these are great transition options. And these are some of the ones that I never heard about with my own transition until I went outside of chiropractic. So a lot of these ideas, in case you think, I'm like, hey, Tom's not just this big, genius or anything like that. No. When I went and talked to the dentists and the medical doctors and the attorneys, you go, how do you guys get out? Well, think about it. When's the last time you saw a solo medical doctor, a solo dentist? I mean, they get out this way. When you see a law firm and it has, 3 different names and none of those people are even practicing anymore, well, that's a partnership that's been structured down the line for years. Now, for some of you, there might be even some additional options that are highlighted over here in this blue box. So, for example, a family transfer, that you maybe have a son or a daughter or a relative that you want to transfer the practice to. Some of you, if you really have an excellent practice with excellent systems, excellent income, you could literally pull yourself out of it and manage it remotely. There might be an investor sale in the future for some of you, as there are groups now that literally just want to purchase a practice. And I can tell you this, if you want to stick around, investor sales are usually pretty good because the investors usually want you to stay around for a while. They come in with money, they provide all the management. So a doc who says, you know what, I don't want to deal with the headaches, but I like treating people, investors may be a nice opportunity for them. Now, there are a couple more options that are highlighted here in the yellow box that I don't think are great, but they are options and better than zero. So a liquidation sale is basically, hey, I'm just going to sell my equipment. A record sale, I'm just going to sell my files over to somebody else who doesn't even want my equipment. As you may imagine, that's not going to get you much in either one of those options, but it will get you something. And they're all better than the red option. Shut her down. To me, there should be no one who just shuts down the practice. So again, part of positioning and preparing yourself is realizing, yes, there are more options than you think. And these things really do happen, and they work out well in real life. Give you a couple quick examples. Dr. Dave over here came to us and said, hey, I've got a great practice, but I want to slow down. And I want to slow down before I kind of run it into the ground because I'm getting a little older and getting a little more tired. And he said, I found somebody who is willing and able to buy. I just don't know how to make this puzzle work, how the pieces all fit, because his prospect had a young family, no management experience, and he doesn't want too much risk. So he said, well, Dave, you just want to slow down. He doesn't want necessarily the risk of like owning all of this in the absence. So what if you stayed around for 6 months or so and helped him with the management? And that would reduce his risk, his fears, and it will allow you to kind of slow down. Well, hey, this was a perfect match for a sell and switch, and that's what we help them do with this. Here's another example. Dr. John, actually they're both Dr. John, came to me and said, you know what, I want to find a buyer now, but I want to keep going and practice for at least 5 or 10 more years. And he said, there's a young guy down the street. He's got his own practice, but he's renting space. He has no future there. Eventually, he's going to want to move out, and he was going to have his own deal. And he's a nice guy. In fact, we've provided some vacation coverage for each other in the past. Should we just kind of combine practices, or what should be our move? Well, we help them establish a partnership and a merger into these two practices. It's a great option for the two of them. Now, Dr. Ted came to us with a really good problem. He said, I've got an awesome practice, but I want more time off. I'm making excellent income, and guess what? I found the love of my life, and I want to have more time to enjoy with her. So I said, hey, great. He said, I'm also a really good manager in that I have some great staff and a great team who can do stuff. The clinic is growing. We hit over 1 million. I've got 2 very motivated associates who really want to buy in. They don't want to just be associates. They want to own. Everyone around here wants the place to grow more. But again, remember point number 1, I don't necessarily want to work more and more and more to grow it. So these guys were a perfect match for a hybrid partnership where Ted sold off a piece of his practice to each one of his associates that still enabled him to retain ownership and retain the management, and it also gave them an ownership opportunity. And guess what? Down the line, he can sell more to them, and that's the plan. So we help them set that up. There are literally so many ways for you to get a great outcome to your sale or your transition. So literally, I want to ask you, what's your next step? Because I hope in this webinar, we've been able to help you, enlighten you so that you can realize there are more steps that I might have thought possible, that they are in fact possible. In fact, we've done them before, and hey, we can help you do them too. So in the couple minutes we have left, I want to offer you 3 options and offers to help you get where you are. The first is what I would call plot. If you are in the stage where you literally need to plot a plan, you need to plot the path. If you're like 5 or more years away from a sale or transition, you need to learn more so you can just plot and plan your path. Then what I'd like to offer you is our free chiropractic practice transitions blueprint. I'd also like to offer you a discount on our Ultimate Exit Strategy program. Now, the blueprint is a tool that we use with our clients to help them plot out their plan. The Exit Strategy program is a book and some auto recordings of the book too that will give you an overview of the entire process of how to plan your practice sale or exit. Again, when you have time to do that, to position everything for it right. So again, I know we're doing this on a recorded webinar, so normally we say type plot is if that's for you. Hang on just one quick second. We'll get you the web address where you can get take advantage of these offers. Now, The second type of offer is for those of you who need to polish your practice first. In other words, you go, hey, I know it's a diamond, but it's a little rough around the edges. There are a few things I'd like to fix. They're a little bit, if I had a little bit more income or a little bit more of this, that, then it would really sell for maximum value. If that's you, and you are 2 to 5 years away from your sale or transition, and you need to grow your practice, or you need to fix some things to maximize its value or attractiveness, and you literally have the time and the energy to focus on improving before you sell, now this is for you. And that last bullet is the key. You have to have the time and the energy. If you say, hey, I'm burnt out, I'm done, I'm fried, I don't want this, well, then what? Guess what? You don't need to polish it. You need to get out. Okay? So here's what I want to offer you. I want to offer you a free focus session where I'm going to jump on a call with you to determine your growth points and your curb appeal. In other words, what could we maximize in your practice? What could you do to improve that curb appeal to make it more attractive? And if the fit is right for you, then we'll offer you a special position in our Shine to Sell coaching program with a discounted rate. Type polish if that's you. Well, actually, you're on a recorded webinar, so just wait a minute for the address if you're in the polish category. And the third category is PRN, and this is not what you're thinking it means. PRN in our case really says the practice is ready now. In other words, Tom, I'm ready now. I don't have the time to polish. I don't have the energy to polish. I don't have the time or energy to plan. I need to launch this thing somewhere because I'm ready to sell now within the next 3 years. And I don't want to focus on the other stuff. I want to focus on the sale or the transition. I want to transition my practice in the next 0 to 3 years to my associate, or to slow down, or I want to sell it. That's it. If that's you, then we're going to give you an address where you can get a free, no obligation strategy session call and a discount on our practice valuation, so we can literally put a price tag on your practice and help you get to that next step. With that, I want to thank all of you for your time and your attention, and to remind you of our special offers that you can see here on this page. If you are interested in the plot offer, which was the free transitions blueprint that we use to help our clients plan their transition when they're 5 or more years out, or the discounted exit strategy offer, then go ahead and type in strategicdc.com/plot, where you'll be taken to a page that will present that offer to you, and you can take advantage of that now. If you're interested in the polish offer, remember that was for those of you who felt like you really need to work a bit on your practice, to grow it, to build it, to polish it, to make it look better so that it will sell for maximum value. If that's you, then please take us up on our free focus session call and the discounted offer into our Shine to Sell coaching program. If that's you, then go to strategicdc.com/polish, and I'd love to speak to you soon. And for those of you who are ready, your practice is ready now, or you are ready now, take us up on the PRN offer, which includes a free strategy session call where we'll map out the next steps to getting your practice sale on the market or your transition in motion, and an offer for our discounted practice valuation. Go to strategicdc.com/PRN, and we'd love for you to take advantage of any of these offers. Now, because our live recording was botched due to technology, if you do have additional questions on what we've covered here in today's presentation, or on any offers, or on practice sales or transition in general, please do email me. Go ahead to info@strategicdc.com and send me an email. I'll be happy to answer that. Thanks so much again for your time, for your attention, for bearing with all the technical troubles. This has been Dr. Tom Necela from Strategic Chiropractor. Take good care.